Hi, I'm going live here today because I want to talk about doing the impossible. Now, I know that's a pretty tall order for somebody you probably haven't seen and don't know and may not even care about. But my story can help you in any aspect of your story because it's about motivation. It's about doing what people tell you can't do because you don't believe them. It's about not being put into a box because that's where they want to put you. As you can tell, I've been around a while, but when I was born 3 months premature, and I was born with what they called cerebral palsy. And here's something that I haven't really talked about much, but if you need motivation, I was born in 1953. And in 1953, if you were 3 months or more premature, you had about a 20% survival rate. Now, I live in Las Vegas. If a casino said, hey, come in and gamble with us, and you've got a 20% chance of winning, I wouldn't go. But I had a 20% survival rate, spent 6 months in an incubator, and guess what? Spoiler alert, I survived. Anyway, back then, if you had cerebral palsy, this was going to be your life, and this is what they laid out to my folks. He can be in a wheelchair, he can be carried, or he can crawl, and that's it. And I did. I spent 20 years in a wheelchair, almost 21, in a wheelchair. In between, I would wear long leg braces that I had to push down on my knee and then slide a little lock bolt over the two pieces of stainless with big leather belts that went around, padded belts that went around my knees and my hips and into my shoes. And it would stretch the muscles in my legs because they said, hey, if we stretch the muscles behind his knee, he's going to get better. And it will stretch the muscles and then he'll be able to walk better. And that was all BS. I mean, they believed it. They weren't feeding us a story, but it wasn't really factual. It was what they knew at the time. So, funny story. They said wear them 1 or 2 hours at a time, and I figured if 1 or 2 hours were good, 10 hours were better. So when I wasn't in a wheelchair at home, I would wear the braces locked, and it would hurt like hell. But I kept doing it because my motivation was to get out of the wheelchair. My motivation was to be like my friends. I had a lot of friends. My life was not bad. I was not ignored. I wasn't ostracized from events. In fact, they went out of their way to include me. But I wanted to be like them. Because back then, this was about 20 years before the Americans with Disabilities Act, the world wasn't set up for somebody in a wheelchair. And the world that did exist was very demeaning. People were nice, but they literally and figuratively looked down on you because they didn't know what else to do. So I got out of the wheelchair and I would put on the braces, and my dad got rid of the dining room table because I was keeping them locked and they were hurting like hell after 2 hours. And he instead put in a pool table. And we would have boards that would go across the top when we wanted to eat. So I like to say that I had a misspent youth shooting pool. But while I was lining up a shot, while I was shooting pool, I almost didn't think about the pain. And I was going to keep those braces locked until they did some good, because all the doctors, all the experts, everybody said this will do some good. They were wrong. And so I was going to college after I graduated high school. And obviously, I wasn't smart enough to go to college before graduation, but I was afterwards. And I decided to transfer. I was living in New York. I'd grown up in New York. I decided to transfer to the University of Arizona in Tucson, Arizona. Didn't know anybody there. Never been out west. And I decided when they accepted me, and even a little bit before, I decided I wasn't going to go there with a wheelchair. I was just going to use the crutches. So after 20 years of being in a wheelchair, I decided, that's it, I'm done. It's over. And I left it behind. So now I land in Tucson, Arizona. I only have the braces and crutches, forearm crutches that wrap around your wrist. And that's the way I went to school. And I would unlock them to sit down in class, and I would lock them again to get up and walk out and walk around and do whatever. And these braces went from my hips down into my shoes. They were steel, and they had big, thick, heavy leather pads. And by the way, thick leather pads pressing tightly against your skin when the temperature outside is 90 degrees, not really comfortable, but I was motivated. I was going to make this work. And then I was only at Arizona for 2 years because I had transferred, so I went in as a junior. And right before my senior year, right before I went back to Tucson from New York, I said, I'm getting rid of the braces. And I did. I left them in New York, just like I had left my wheelchair in New York. And I went back to Tucson. And I spent the next year just using crutches because I was going to prove that the experts, that the doctors, that all of them were wrong. I was motivated to prove them wrong. And so I went through that, and I went through graduation, and that's another story in itself because at the time graduation was on the football field, which meant I had to walk down steps from the top of the stadium all the way down to the football field. And to make it even more challenging, I had decided I was going to go through graduation like anyone else. So there I was in a cap and gown in our gymnasium, which is where everybody gathered before walking across to the football field, and nobody was sitting down, and I decided I wasn't going to sit down either. So for 2 hours I stood with crutches, then I walked across the quad, walked into the stadium, and walked down the stairs in a nylon cap and gown in about 90-degree temperatures. And guess what? I made it. And I made it because I was motivated. I was motivated to prove the experts wrong. And after a while, that became my motivation because I wanted to show myself that I could do it. Anyway, that's my early story. I just thought I'd put it out there, and I hope somebody gets something out of it. I do online virtual motivational coaching for anything, for projects, anything, life, projects, you name it. I will help you get through it. And you will get through it. So thank you for allowing me to tell part of my story. And I will talk to you later. Take care.